Alright, what we're going to do today is we're going to rebuild this Edelbrock carburetor. It's a 1407. It's a 750. I think if you're doing a 650 it should be the same. That would be a 1406. It should be pretty much the same rebuild as this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through on how to do it. I ended up getting the kit off of offline. Hopefully it's going to be a good kit. I haven't used this. I've used this company for jet ski carburetors. I haven't used it for my car carburetor. So this carburetor here I picked up at a garage sale for 30 bucks. No idea on the condition. All the guy told me was he replaced the carburetor with a different one before he sold the car. So I'm going to assume the carburetor probably did not run the car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and rebuild it. The first thing I'm going to do is, you can see it's got a bunch of dirt all over it. I'm going to get some rubber gloves, put on my hands, try to protect my hands. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to clean the carburetor on the outside. Just going to go through, clean it, get all the dirt, loose particles off of it. And I'm going to pull the seal, this whole gasket off the bottom. Actually, it might come right off here. Just grab it, pull it off, get it out of the way because it's trash, it's junk. Go through, get this base plate cleaned up, and just clean up the outside of it before doing anything, before disassembling it, to try to get rid of any dirt and all that stuff that can possibly get in here as you rebuild it. So that's what you want to do first, just make sure it's clean, and we'll go from there. Now, to do this carb rebuild, I'm going to show you guys some of the tools that I used. Okay, you're going to need a small ruler. That's one thing you're going to need. I used a 7/64 drill bit. I used the shank part of it, checking the float height. That's what the instruction booklets say to use in this thing that came with my kit. You're also going to need a T15 Torx. You're also going to need a T20 for this particular carburetor. The T15 is these two little screws up here, or you can even use a 1/4-inch socket if you wanted to. The T20 is for the venturis and the nozzle to take it out. To operate them, of course, you're going to need some type of screwdriver to put the bit in, or if you have a T-handle Torx, you don't need a screwdriver then. The other thing you're going to need is, I like to have all three of these screwdrivers, the big, the small, and the medium tip screwdrivers. For when I take them apart, it makes life easy, because then I have a different screwdriver depending on what part of the carburetor I'm working on. I use a couple of them. The other thing that's nice to have is something like this. This is a bolt I took. I ground it down on the grinder to make a nice little fine tip on it, so that way I can use it to get into tight areas and get gasket material off. I also used a razor blade where it was nice and open when I needed to clean the gasket material off. And it's nice to have a couple little picks. I use both of these picks here, a straight and a corner one, to get different parts out, different springs, so I can grab them with it, pull the spring out. And lastly, a writing utensil, so that way you can write down like your jets and stuff. Make sure you put your jets back in the right spot when you take them out, because the front and the rear, when I say front and rear on this, I was just talking about front and rear of the carburetor. Your secondary and primary will use different main jets, so that way you can make a note of the jets on the positions, however you want to note it, front, rear, back, forward, just make a note on how it is, because you got a total of 4 jets in this carburetor, 1 on each side, and then actually I got 2 on each side, I should say, but 1 on each side in the front, 1 on each side in the back. So you got a total of 4. So make note on where they came out, so that way you can put them back in the corresponding spots. Trying to think about anything else that would be good to make mention with. Carb clean. You're going to need a couple cans, at least a can, if not 2 cans of carb clean. It's better to be generous with that, because you can always go buy more. Make sure you're doing this in a well-ventilated area using carburetor clean. You don't want to do it in a small closed-up room using carb clean, because that will get to you. So I'm doing it in a big open area that has a lot of ventilation, so that way I'm not sitting here breathing it, because it's not very good to breathe. So this is about the gist of it, and make sure to have maybe a couple containers might help too. Like I had this one that I could dump all my small parts in, so that way I didn't lose any when I was taking stuff apart. And I can keep track of all my parts. And that way if I got to stop today, I can come back to it tomorrow and I don't go, where did my ball bearing roll off to? That's about all with all the tools. Okay, gone through, I cleaned the carburetor now, cleaned the outside. I ended up using probably about half my can of carb clean, and I used a toothbrush. I went through and cleaned it all, tried to get off as much dirt as I could before even opening it up. So it actually came out pretty good. I got most of the dirt off the bottom there. I got all the old fuel staining off the side. Looks like they had a pretty good finish on this. I guess this was a polished one at one point. So it's all nice and clean. First thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the back here. I'm going to take this fitting out. I'm not going to be using it. I don't need it. I'll take it out now. So when I clean stuff, the Teflon tape that's on it, I'll be able to get that off and out of there and clean that when it's all apart. I also went through, opened my carburetor kit, see what goodies came with that. What's included with that is a nice diagram on how it comes apart, which is awesome. It labels all the parts, so that way I'll know what something is by looking at the diagram. It also gives some basic instructions on how to take it apart and how to do all that. It tells about like the 1406, 1407, and 1405s and 1400s on the fuel pump, the pump inside the carburetor. It also tells me how to adjust float level, float drop, an electric choke if you have it. This carburetor does not have the electric choke. Some carburetors do, some do not. Electric choke would go mount up to these holes here and attach to this lever for choke. But this does not have it. This has actually been set up for a cable choke. That's what this bracket's for. If you happen to have one you don't know, it's for a cable choke if you're going to use a cable choke instead of the electric choke on the carburetor. So the first things first is what you got to do is if you're going to remove like the fitting like I'm going to do, you remove that. Then you go through and you take the flat blade screws out of the top of the carburetor that are around the circumference of it. Okay, you take them out. There's another one. There. You take all them out so you can take the top of the carburetor off. I'm going to set this down and I'm going to go through and loosen them and get that other fitting out that I don't need. With my engine, I'm not running anything vacuum. I'm not running a PCV valve like a lot of engines have. I'm just running a straight breather in that. I'm also not running vacuum for the distributor. A lot of people will run a vacuum from the distributor from one of these two ports up here. And usually you run it like a PCV valve to this unless you're running dual PCV valves. So like that fitting would be for. So you can also run them for, well, and actually that would be PCV back there. This might be for like a brake booster or something if you're doing it that way. Some cars do have brake boosters on them. I do not even have a brake booster on mine. Mine's drum brakes all around, and it's manual drum brakes per se. It's hydraulic manual, I should say. Because you also do have manual drum brakes that are all done by Linkage. This is a hydraulic drum brake setup on this car. The other thing I forgot to cover before you take the screws out, okay, is look at these rods here. You have these little tiny clips that you have to pull out to get the rod disconnected from that. You got one there. You also have one there on that. Please take note of the position, because this is for the fuel pump I was talking about earlier. Take note on the position of where the rod is. There's 3 holes in this, and it depends on which carburetor you have. So make note of that, so that way you can make sure to put this rod here back in the correct position. Like mine's up in the 3rd hole from the bottom. Let me see if I can move it so you guys can see the holes. There you go. So mine's up in the 3rd hole. My instructions also make mention of that too, in the little instruction booklet that came with this kit. But make note of that, so that way you can make sure to put yours in the same hole. The other thing I got thinking about too is I'm going to take this screw out and this for the fuel pump, because I do have a new fuel pump to put in here. So the kit that I ordered has a metal one. A lot of the kits have plastic ones. So you got to look and decide on what you want to do. If you want to spend a couple bucks more to get a metal rod or get a plastic rod to put back in here. This one looks like it might have a plastic rod to start with. So I think it's the OEM one still in there. But I'm going to take that off right now. That guy, take that screw off and that. And also look at that on how it's positioned, so that way you can make sure to put it back together. Now I still haven't taken the top off yet. I got that off. Then I decided, you know what, let me take these off, because I think these are for metering rods. And that's what I looked at my little diagram there, and I can see that's what they are. I'm actually happy I did, because at first, the very first one that I grabbed, the side, the metering rod was stuck. They're on springs, they're like spring loaded, and it was stuck down in there. I reached down in there and tapped it and it popped. So I'm going to take them out. I'm going to clean them and set them off to the side and make sure I try to keep them, you know, on the left and right on right. I believe they're the same from looking at the diagram. They're both number 4 metering rods, 2 of them. But I'm just going to try to keep them on each side just to make sure that they are not, you know, set up for different sides. They should be the same, but just in case somebody's gone in here and swapped around or did something that I don't know. So, now I've gone through. I've taken the screws out of the top finally. I'm going to go through and see if I can split this half. I haven't tried yet, so it's going to be stuck. Because the gasket's been on there for a while, you might have to pry it a little bit. I'm going to see if I can position this here. I'll be right back. So, I just set the phone down because I needed 2 hands. So what I did is I took my big screwdriver. I was able just to get it in here on this corner right here. Put a little bit of pressure on it and go pop. Now don't put too much, because if you did forget a screw, you might break something. So if it doesn't want to come off, just take a minute, set back, make sure you got all the screws around the circumference. Because a lot of these manufacturers like to hide screws. They don't on this one, they're all right on the top. You can see them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 screws I took out. So, let's see how it looks. Yeah, it don't look too bad. As you can see, you look inside, you can see the buildup, the varnish on the inside of this thing from it sitting. So chances are it might have ran the guy's car, but it might not have ran very good. And that's what happens when you let stuff sit for a while. You get varnish, you get buildup, you get all that stuff on it. I'm surprised the floats don't have any on them. I'm wondering if the needles are stuck though. Yeah, see? Oh, there they go. To jiggle a little bit. You see the needles moved, but they were stuck at first. And see now, and when I flip it back over, the needles are stuck. Now, give it a little tapping and it dropped down, but that's not necessarily good. And the other thing you can actually see is, sorry about my arm there. When you look at this, you can see the fuel line on there from where they're set. So one thing to check and make sure when rebuilding these, I don't hear any fuel sloshing. So I'm going to pull them pins out a little bit. I'll show you. With it sitting here, should just be able to push the pin out. Slide the pin out as such. Don't want to lose a pin, you need it. But take your floats, okay, and shake them. I don't hear anything in the float. You can even shake it by your ear. Make sure that there's no fuel in there, that they didn't spring a leak and start filling up with fuel. So make sure you clean them. Try to, you know, get the dirt off if you can, best you can, because you can see where the varnish is actually on this lower part, and the clean part's the top. See where it started getting some varnish on the side. You can see varnish on the bottom a little bit. So you want to clean that off, because it won't be bad on this one, but on other carburetors sometimes that can really affect it. They're going to pull both floats off, okay. Then you can see the jets. They're not jets, I'm sorry. The main needles. The jets are in there. but you can see the main needles is what I meant. Wrong thing. But you want to, you know, pull your jets out. My kit that I bought came with new needles and seats in the screens. So see that little screen? There's a little screen up in there. At least there should be. Yeah. You see it right up in there. So you want to pull your main needle out, replace it with the new needle and seats that came with your kits, and make sure to put the O-ring on it. If you don't put the O-ring, it's not going to be good either. But put the new needle and seat in there, and then you got to go through and adjust the float. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm going to pull this top apart, pull this old gasket off. Might need to take a razor blade and, you know, clean the old gasket off once you get it pulled off. I'm going to pull both needle and seats off, both floats off. I'm going to get all that cleaned up, and then I will continue on and show you guys what else I'm doing with this thing. The other thing I also did was I pulled my fuel line off the side of the carburetor. You can see right there. So I pulled that off just to make my life a little bit easier for moving stuff around. You probably could leave it on, but I just figured it'd be easier. So I'm going to go through, do this top of this carb, get this top all squared away, and I'll show you guys adjusting the floats, and then we'll cover the bottom on what to disassemble and what to clean and, you know, what to do. Now what I was saying about main needle, or main jet I should say, not needle. Main jet. You can see my fuel pumps right there. We'll go over that too. But the main jets are down in here. See, right there, there's one jet. And the other jet is back in here. So you're going to want to end up pulling both them jets out that are down in there. And make sure the jets are clean. Because if they're blocked up, the carburetor's not going to run. And you can see how this crud, how I'm breaking it loose just with the pick. Now all that crud that's down in there, okay. Imagine running the car, having all this come loose just by the fuel circulating in here. Okay, that will come loose and that could block up your main jet. So you want to try to get this area as clean as you can when you get to that part. So pick one part, do one part, then go from there. So I'm going to go through and try to get the top part ready, and I'll be showing you guys that momentarily. Now, as I was saying though, make sure you clean everything. You can see I'm still working on cleaning stuff, but I figured I'd show. Took a little bit of Scotch-Brite to this stuff just to help quickly knock it off. Used a little bit of carb cleaner and Scotch-Brite. Now, I started this because I wanted to show you guys even the plates here. Look at this. I could probably write my name in it. So just write high. But you can see how much dirt is on that. Now all that would really screw up your freshly rebuilt carburetor. And even this one too, see? So you got to make sure to look at all the stuff. I mean, even though this is the top of the carburetor, it still has a bunch of dirt in it. So you want to make sure you get that stuff off of there. And just kind of clean up the stuff. I mean, you can clean some of this off up in there too. See how that's coming off? Just take a paper and you can wipe it. That's just some build up from the intake and stuff. So that's up in the intake. That's the bottom of the butterfly. Backfires and stuff like that. So you want to try to clean as much as you can when you have it all apart, because it's easier to clean it now than have to take it back apart after you found something it's not running, or you put it on there and it's running for a few minutes and the car stops because so one of the jets got blocked up or something like that. So make sure you clean it as good as you can. Okay, so I've gone through, I've cleaned all my places, cleaned up the old gasket off, but I cleaned the butterfly pretty much. So I cleaned all that. So now you're going to take your gasket and set your gasket on top for you, so that way you can put everything else in. You don't forget it. Get your gasket placed in there. Sorry about the lighting. I gotta move it around. My light keeps moving. Bump it and moves. So now you're gonna take your new needle and seat, and you're gonna put your screen in it like that. Okay. You don't want to forget your screens. It keeps all the small stuff out. Before you stick it in there, you're going to grab your gasket. Put your gasket on it. And then, alright, so now I went through, I installed the main needles again, put the new ones in there, installed the floats. Now, what they say to do is to set the float height. It's supposed to be 7/16 off of this, okay? And they said to use a 7/16 drill. It's actually a pretty big drill. So you're supposed to be able to put it under there and not move the floats. So you can see my float height is not set right on. It's set right on that one. You know, I can, if I do it this way, or more coordinated. So it's pretty much set right. It's a skosh low. So I'm gonna adjust both of them so then that fits under there. Then they also say to check the float drop. So you got to flip the floats over. Set that somewhere that you can check it. I'm just gonna show you this way. So then you take a ruler, and it's supposed to be 15/16 of an inch. And you're supposed to check it from there to there to make sure that that's set right for the drop. So, hold the ruler up against that, set that, and make sure that's 15/16 of an inch. So look at your ruler, and you could set it to that, and then see. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then the top of the carburetor will be done. And then I can start doing the bottom. I think I figured out what the guy's problem, his real problem was, on probably why he pulled this carburetor off. Not because of all the gunk that's down in there, okay? But the accelerator pump is not working. Okay, right now what I did is I put some carb cleaner down in that base bowl of that just to see if it would even push any. So it's supposed to squirt some fuel out of these two nozzles right here. Okay, when I push this down, it builds pressure, but it's not squirting anything out of there. So you can see it squirting out of there, around the O-ring for that, but it's actually not squirting anything through the body of that. So I'm gonna have to disassemble it completely, clean it. So I opened my gasket kit and I have all these little gaskets. So I can go ahead and pull that off and pull these venturis off and hopefully clean them. I think I'm gonna pull them off and let them soak overnight, and I'll finish with it tomorrow. So what I'm thinking I might do is actually pull that apart, pull this apart, pull this apart. These, I might have to get some other gaskets if they're not included with this kit. I'll figure that out. I think they are, though. I think they are. So I'm going to go through, pull all this, I think, apart. And then I can let it soak overnight in some solvent, is what I think I'm going to do. And then I can try to blow it out tomorrow and assemble it tomorrow and clean it tomorrow. That's what I think I might do. That's what you might have to do with one of these carbs like this that's been sitting a while to get everything clean. You want to make sure your accelerator pump works and all that, because if it doesn't work, the car's not going to run very good. So, yep. Okay. So, I got it pretty much disassembled now. I took out the venturis on the forward and aft area for the, I guess, primary and secondary venturi is the best way to say it. I found the squirter nozzle to be blocked, so I got all them sitting here soaking. So that way they can soak overnight, and I can hopefully put it back together tomorrow. They'll come clean. I just put some carb cleaner in each side to let it soak a little bit more. I'm going to cover it with a rag just to keep dirt out and try to keep the stuff from evaporating as fast as it usually does. The other problem is I also need to go get some more carb clean. Can's empty. And I found another can I had, and that's pretty much empty too. So that's about all I can do right now. I need to run out to Wally World and get some more. But at least now I got the top of the carburetors all done. So when I get the bottom half of it done, I just got to take the top half, put it back on the bottom half, and pretty much be done. I'm gonna have to do some more adjustment on the. I'm gonna have to check the fuel pump. They tell you how to adjust it. They also tell you the rods too, but like I said before, just make sure you mark it anyway on how to adjust it, on how that's supposed to be set up. So I got everything else all set up, so that's done. I'm going to take this all apart, because when you lift this up, you take this out of here, you can see all the dirt and debris down on each side of that. So I'm going to clean that up too and make sure that's all nice and clean. Pull off all them old gaskets clean down in there, and just try to get everything else as clean as you can. That's really the best you can do. I mean, you want it spotless if you can help it, but the only way to really do that is to send it out, let somebody ultrasonic the body and do this, do that, and yeah, you can do that. It doesn't necessarily need to be done. You just take your time, use some acid brushes, go through, and you can scrub, or an old toothbrush if you don't have an acid brush. The other thing that also helps is if you have some Scotch-Brite or an emery pad. Something that's not very abrasive, just to knock the stuff loose if it's stuck. Whatever you do though, just try to keep track of all your small parts, because small parts tend to disappear if you drop them. They'll disappear on the floor as quick as they can, and then you won't ever find them. They go to the land of Never Never Land. So that's about it, and I'll go through putting it back together. You just got 2 screws on this one, 2 screws here, 2 screws here, 2 screws there, 2 screws there, and that's about all you got to do is just do the reverse steps of how you took it apart. From looking at my kit, I was looking at the parts list. It does look like the parts are included, all the underlined parts are included, so it should be good. And you do have some other checking you can do when you have it apart, and you can check your fast idle linkage. For that's basically if you have your choke on, where this sits up against that. It also tells you under load how to make sure it's opening properly, and your secondaries, make sure your secondaries are open properly, and make sure your secondaries are open far enough. That's an important thing too. And then also closing too. You want to make sure they're closed and open far enough. And you can check that when you flip the body over. Check that from underneath. So you can have the carburetor assembled, I believe, to check that too. So I'll go through and talk about doing that when I get all this cleaned and the top half put back on. I'll flip it over and check all that. Yep. Fun, fun, fun. If you guys, I don't know if I'm going to be making another, I'll make another video, but if you guys want, just please like, subscribe, follow, all the above things, and, you know, if you have any comments, feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer them. And by the way, thanks if you guys subscribe too. Thank you. Alright, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you a run through on what I did. I pretty much cleaned it. I still have a couple little spots to clean that I just noticed I missed, but I cleaned primarily the heavy on the inside. I just set it back together with no gaskets because I want to show you guys what I took apart and explain it. I took all these screws out of everything here. Let me get a pointer. I took these screws out, and these screws, and them 2 screws, and the 2 screws from this. Okay, this here is your secondary. I also forgot I have the butterfly weight valve out to make sure that there's air going through the secondary when it opens. This here is your primer. You know how you hit the throttle and it squirts fuel? It's connected up to the fuel pump. Okay, so you're gonna take them screws out, lift it off. There's going to be a gasket in there. Now, there's also going to be, bring this over here, there's going to be a weight and a ball bearing in there. Try not to lose the weight or the ball bearing. You will need them. This is the weight right here. Okay, that is the weight right there. Okay, it sits on the ball bearing, and and the weight holds the ball bearing down. When it does that, it allows it so when you whack the throttle, you'll get fuel coming out of this side. It'll get pumped through here through the fuel pump, a little accelerator pump, I should say, not fuel pump, accelerator pump. You whack the fuel, that gets pushed down, which then that pushes fuel from this side up through your squirter, which then it pushes fuel through the two nozzles on the squirter. Okay, now you take that out, and then you could turn the carburetor upside down. The weight and the ball bearing should fall out of there. In my case, the weight came out, but the ball bearing stayed in there because it was all varnished up in there, and the ball bearing was actually stuck down in there in the seat area. So now the next thing I did was I took the venturis off on both sides. Okay, now when you take them off, you might want to take one loose, clean it, and look, because I didn't realize this the other day, and I believe I got them set back, but I didn't know that they have the different numbers on there. So this is a 784, that's a 783 on this side. So I went through and I checked the main jet setups, the air fuel setups with the different size venturis, I guess. It might be set up differently, and these two up here were set up differently. So you're going to take them out. You're going to have a gasket between there. I've already taken the gasket off. Kind of came apart. So you can take that apart. You can take what I got here is I got an old bolt. I took an old bolt to the bench grinder, and I sharpened it down into a scraping tool. It works really good because it's nice, it's small, I can get in here, and I was able to get the chunks of gasket unstuck in a tiny little area. So you want to go through, make sure that's clean down in there, make sure all that's clean, and also make sure that these are clean in here, okay? Them little holes, they need to be clean. So you want to make sure that's clean, and you want to make sure... Let's pick up where I left off, where my phone died. I had to restart it. Apparently the battery was dead or something. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, back to these ports here. You want to make sure you got them all clean. You also want to make sure that that is clean going up into that. Okay, you can blow air through it, wipe it down with some carb cleaner. You can also clean the inside. You know, just spray that down, wipe it down, make sure all this stuff's clean in here. Try to get stuff as clean as you can. You know, and check and make sure all the little holes are clean. So take them all on both sides. Okay, like I said, clean down in there. Now the next thing you're gonna do is these rear venturis. You can take the screws out, and they pull right off. Again, same type of deal. Check your holes. Make sure all your holes are clean. It's even got holes on the side. You want to make sure them holes are clean. And then take off both of the venturis. You know, take the two screws out. There's usually a gasket between it. Like I said before, I had taken this already apart and cleaned this part of it. Then this would normally be sitting. If I can get it set back in there. There. Normally that would be sitting in there, so that way it can move. So then you can take that out, clean all of them up. I had a bunch of, you can still see them down in here a little bit where I couldn't get that as clean as I'd like. But you can wipe them butterflies down, wipe the weights down, check all that, clean down in these holes just to get the dirt out, and clean down into there, and just try to make sure everything's all clean as it can be. Then once all that's clean, then you can start reassembling it with the new gaskets and all that stuff that came in your kit. So you're got all them nice new fancy gaskets and clips and stuff. So then you put them back in the carburetor and start reassembling it. Alright, went through, I got all my screws put back in. Told my Venturis in. I got the little butterfly valve back in here for the secondaries. Put my primary orifices back in. Put my fuel pisser or squirter, the squirter would be proper, back in. I got, you know, all them screws put back in. And I got my fuel, the spring, the return spring for the fuel pump. So then got my new pump. Got that right there. I go there. Next thing for me to do is for me to take the top of the carburetor that I rebuilt earlier, that I went through, it cleaned, put new all the new stuff in, new gaskets. So now I just got to put that back on, get this through that hole, and put the screws back in. And then the carburetor should be more or less done. I got to check the adjustment of the arm for the fuel pump. And then I got to check the opening and all that stuff on the bottom, make sure everything's opening properly. Did pull these screws out earlier for the adjustment. Pulled them out, made sure they were all nice and clean and ready to be put back in. I would recommend, if with doing your own, that you would also go through and get new caps on the lines that you're not using instead of reusing the old ones. Because the old caps do get old and brittle and they like to break. I'm going to go to the local auto parts store and probably just bring this with me. They sell vacuum line plugs or caps, and I'll just pick up a package of them and put them on. Alright, so I've gone through, I've put all the screws back in the top of this. Okay, I even put the choke cable holder back on. Put all the screws in. I put the fuel line, the end for the fuel, back on. Put a new gasket between it, so that way it hopefully will seal and not leak. I hooked up my cables, or not cables, sorry. Hooked up my rods, is what I should say. And remember to put the clips back on the back side. Hook them up. Put my primer back on there, squirter, the fuel pump. So that way that will all work. Now the only other thing I got to do on this top side of the carburetor is I got to put my metering rods back in. There and there. Now there were no gaskets on the top of this, just the plate screwed in tight. But you got to make sure when you put them back in, you remember to put your springs back in. They won't work well without the springs. The car won't run really without them either. So make sure to put them back in the top of your carburetor, and then put the plates back on and tighten it all up. That's about all you need to do for checking the carburetor. There are some checks you can do on the bottom, which were included in my directions on checking fast idle, linkages, secondary valve. Everything seems to check pretty good on mine. It's a good idea to check these anyway, just to make sure that they're correct. On mine, they were. I didn't have to adjust anything on them. The only thing I did have to really adjust on this thing was the float levels and the stops. But it's probably because I changed the needle and seat valves on both of them, so that might have been why I didn't check it beforehand. But that's pretty much how you rebuild this carburetor. So there's not too much to it. I mean, it's a quite simple carburetor. Before you put it back on the car, though, just double check, make sure all your linkages are, move freely. Everything works like it should. So that way you don't have an issue where you put it back in the car, maybe the throttle gets stuck wide open. At least make sure all that works. Make sure to put your return springs back on. All the above good things. Make sure everything just works like it should beforehand. Now on yours, you might not be able to operate the choke if you have an electric choke on there like I'm doing. Mine's set up for a cable so I can operate it by hand like this. So that's about it. Make sure to save your gaskets that came with it, because you're going to need the base gasket. And then you're also going to need your air cleaner gasket. So hopefully you'll use it. goes up there like that, and of course this goes in the bottom. Use new ones that come with the kit. This I did not need. This was for the choke. Since I don't have a choke on there, I don't need it. It did come with some extra gaskets, which are for different variants of the carb. So it comes with some extra stuff for different, you know, the kits are more or less generic per se. So they'll work a couple different ones. So that's about it. If you guys like this video, please subscribe to the channel. You know, like my videos, comment, ask questions. I'll feel free to try to answer the questions if you guys have any. Thank y'all.